Welcome to our weekly Facebook Live update for COVID-19. This is an employer advisory. For those who have joined us before, welcome back, and it's delightful to have you with us this morning. For those who haven't joined us before and this is your first time, my name's Bronwyn Pearson and I'm from Pinnacle People Solutions. And as I said, welcome to our weekly Facebook Live update. So our company, Pinnacle People Solutions, provides human resource services, solutions, advice, support, strategies, you name it, to regionally based small to medium-sized businesses and not-for-profit organisations. And we are here to help you and your business through these incredibly challenging COVID-19 times. So good morning, Joe. Lovely to see you with us this morning. So we obviously are delighted to be here supporting our clients and our audience all the time, not just during COVID. But please ask any questions that you might have as we go along this morning. I'll do my best to answer them in real time. Outside of this, you can also contact myself or my fantastic team anytime via Facebook, email, telephone, website, LinkedIn, you name it. All sorts of contact details, which I'm sure are going to go up in the chat screen in just a moment, so that you'll have those details and you can reach out to us with any questions or feedback or comments that you might have. Good morning, Jess. Lovely to see everybody. So for those who've been regulars, you'll remember that over about 19 weeks since the beginning of COVID, we had actually been doing a weekday morning update every weekday morning at 9:15 for business owners and managers and staff on dealing with COVID-19 and its effects on businesses, staff and our communities. As well as providing more general information about a wide variety of staffing related topics. The pandemic obviously isn't over. Victoria is a very good example of that, and it obviously won't be for quite some time. But as we learn to live with the crisis, we are finding our new normals. So obviously Pinnacle People Solutions, we are on this journey with you. We have ourselves been coping with understanding JobKeeper, transitioning to work from home. I'm back in the office this morning bringing the live stream to you from my lovely office. So this is the first time in weeks and weeks and weeks. Transitioning to work from home, obviously, managing health and safety obligations, consulting regularly with our staff and trying to keep all the balls in the air, just like everybody else is trying to do. It's been a privilege to be with you across this period of time, originally obviously daily, to help you and your business survive and thrive in unbelievably challenging times. So we know that for rural and regional communities in particular, the triple whammy of drought, bushfire and now COVID has hit regional and remote Australia incredibly hard, but every single day we're seeing the strength and resilience to come out the other side, and we are here to help and support you to achieve that. So we've now transitioned as of last week to a weekly Facebook Live update on a Monday morning. Thank you for bearing with us for changing the time to 9:45 this morning. Normally we would be here at 9:15. So the purpose of this weekly live update is to essentially give you the week's update on everything COVID-19 and related, which is a potential impact for business owners, managers and their staff. So just a few things to update you on, of course, since I was last on air with you on Monday the 29th of June, last Monday. We now have state government grants of $3,000 which opened on the 1st of July. So small businesses and not-for-profit organisations can apply for the Small Business Recovery Grant. And we are going to pop up the link to that in just a moment. So the grant is intended to assist businesses as they reopen from the restrictions imposed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The grant is intended to support safely reopening or upscaling operations. So expenses intended to be covered will include things like marketing, communications, advertising, staff training, business advice and continuity, additional cleaning services and equipment or fit-out costs associated with social distancing and digital solutions. So that's quite a broad category of areas that you could use this money to get support with. So eligible expenses can only be purchased, however, from the 1st of July. So you can't have already spent the money and then go for the grant. You have to go for the grant and then only be able to put eligible expenses to that from the 1st of July. And the grant only applies when no other support is available. So applications do close on the 16th of August. And to be eligible, as at the 1st of March this year, you need to be a small business. You need to have an ABN, an annual turnover of more than $75,000 a year. You need to employ less than 20 full-time equivalent staff. You need to be in a highly impacted industry. And attachment A in the link that we have just popped up there in the chat screen for you is where you can determine whether you are a highly impacted industry. You need to be able to report a payroll below the current New South Wales payroll tax threshold of $900,000. And you need to have experienced a decline in turnover of at least 30% from March 2020 to July 2020 to the equivalent period of at least 2 weeks in 2019. So, and you are required to declare your costs associated with either reopening or upscaling. So those details are there in the chat screen for you. So don't hesitate to get up there. As I said previously, with the $10,000 New South Wales state government grants, you might be surprised to discover that you are eligible. So get up there and have a look. It's well worth your time to do that. So since we spoke to you last Monday, of course, we've had tick over the new financial year, the 1st of July. Very important to remind everybody that the minimum wage has been raised as of the 1st of July, and its impact on sectors and relevant modern awards is to be staggered. We will actually give you a link to the details of when I talked about that the week before last, so that you have all of those details, but you should be looking at increasing your payroll from the 1st of July or potentially later than that for other industries. So get in touch with us if you've got any questions about that. But also from the 1st of July, that rang, for those of us in New South Wales, a raft of eased New South Wales coronavirus restrictions, which came in right in time for school holidays, beginning at the end of school last Friday, but also the winter break, which is going to look somewhat different this year to what it's looked like in previous years. So from the 1st of July, so from last Wednesday, indoor venues, including pubs, cafes and restaurants, as well as function venues, can hold any number of people as long as they remain seated and stick to the 1 person per 4 square metre rule. That also includes weddings, which were previously subjected to separate limitations and capped at 20 guests. A maximum of 10,000 fans are now allowed to fill stadiums for sporting or cultural events from the 1st of July, while community sport can resume for kids and adults alike. So I know there was lots of people very excited about that starting up again last Wednesday. And last weekend, of course, this previous weekend, we would have seen a lot of our televised sports with up to 10,000 people in the venues, which we hadn't seen for quite some time. The New South Wales State Government also increased the capacity of public transport services from the 1st of July, so from last Wednesday, allowing 68 passengers on a train and 23 on a bus, and double the cap implemented in May. So some things, however, are staying very much the same. So the 20 guest limit that you have on your own household and as well as outdoor gatherings remains in place, which means that nightclubs and music festivals are still off the cards. So what can you do then this winter break in particular? So the winter break began in New South Wales as of last Friday, this last weekend. And will continue through to the 19th of July, meaning we've got about 1 million students in the state who have 2 weeks worth of free time to fill, And I know there's lots of working parents who feel like that was only very recently that they had them at home. Bless. So for those who are interested, the Sydney Harbour Bridge climb, Luna Park are going to be reopening this week, while the Blue Mountains Scenic World will also be opening as well. Ice skating rinks across the state have reopened, along with museums, galleries, libraries and some cinemas, but obviously everybody is still subjected to the 4 square metre rule. Now, if you're looking at going to the ski slopes at all in the snowy region, just be careful. Although the 2020 season has gone ahead, there's been a huge reduction in capacity that has resulted in mountain passes and accommodation essentially mostly selling out. So you may not be able to do that if you haven't already booked. Where can you travel? So although international travel remains off the cards, and in fact last week or the week before when Qantas announced that it was making 6,000 staff redundant, the head of Qantas, Alan Joyce, estimated that international travel wouldn't come back onto the agenda until July next year. So we're not looking at that international travel resuming anytime very soon. New South Wales people, though, are free to visit Queensland, Victoria and the ACT these school holidays. However, there are a few catches. We've obviously seen a significant spike in Victoria, and a whole range of suburbs and areas in Victoria have been put into lockdown as a consequence of those community transmission outbreaks. Our New South Wales Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, has refused to shut the New South Wales-Victoria border, but she has told New South Wales people not to travel to Melbourne at all, and has encouraged New South Wales accommodation vendors to not allow Melburnians to travel. From the 10th of July, so in 4 days' time, Queensland will welcome travellers from every state except for Victoria, and Victorian citizens will need to quarantine for 14 days before they can visit Queensland. So everyone else entering Queensland will need to sign a form swearing that they haven't been to Victoria in the past 2 weeks, and the Health Minister has warned that strict penalties will apply to people who lie about any travel to Victoria. We also have received the information that flights and train travel coming from Victoria into New South Wales, all passengers being checked. Some have been found to be infectious and have been therefore put immediately into quarantine. Travel to South Australia is not permitted for New South Wales or Victorian people after the South Australian government scrapped plans to fully reopen their borders by the 20th of July. Northern Territory last advice is that they're still planning to open their borders on the 17th of July, so 9 days' time. But people who live in Melbourne hotspots will have to self-isolate for 14 days at their own cost upon arrival, and Tasmania's borders are still remain shut to interstate travellers. So these are important things to be factoring in as businesses, no matter what industries you're in terms of travellers and your services, providing your goods and services. So what we do know for those colleagues in Victoria is that within the restricted postcodes, and there are a whole range, I think there's a dozen at last count, postcodes that have had stage 3 lockdown procedures enacted again. Auctions, for those in real estate and so forth, auctions can only take place remotely, and inspections are only allowed to happen by private appointment. The advice about restricted postcodes doesn't cover leaving the restricted postcode to view a house, but it's safe to assume the overarching advice of don't leave the postcode except for the 4 valid reasons, so medical, work, groceries, etc. would apply. Interestingly, flight attendants and baggage handling staff from Qantas and Jetstar have been brought in to work in Melbourne's quarantine hotels, not to be involved in security work, just to be clear, but to provide other support services. And as we know, residents of 9 public housing towers in Melbourne are waking this morning to a second full day of hard lockdown. So we had over the weekend the announcement that 9 of Melbourne's public housing towers will be in lockdown for 5 days, and none of the almost 3,000 residents will be allowed to leave their apartments for any reason. So that is a hard lockdown. And when asked about why such drastic measures for those towers, when in other places a softer lockdown has been the approach, Victoria's Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton has made it clear that the environment in those towers is desperately challenging because of a range of factors like the density of them, the jobs of many who live in them, and they've been likened to cruise ships in terms of their potential to spread the virus. So the other thing that we have to be aware of in New South Wales is that anyone travelling to New South Wales who has been in a hotspot location in Victoria within the last 14 days, so it doesn't matter if you don't live there, you can't have been in any of those locations in the last 14 days. If you have, you must not travel to New South Wales, or plenty of other places in Australia, of course, if you've spent time in those hotspot suburbs in any capacity. There are super limited exemptions to that, which we will give you a link to, but if you don't fall under them and you're caught in New South Wales, you could be jailed for 6 months or fined $11,000. So we're talking serious restrictions. Lots of questions have been asked about going back to school in Victoria, for example, given the recent issues with reimposition of lockdowns across certain postcodes. At the moment, it's still back to school as per normal for term 3 for Victorians. Even in restricted postcodes, children are allowed to return to school at this stage. And the Premier has said that he would give, the government would give families as much notice as possible if that advice were to change. So we've also had in the last 24 hours the Australian Medical Association President calling for a sensible and necessary pause in the relaxation of coronavirus restrictions because of the concerning situation in Melbourne. His view and the AMA's view as that he represents is that localised outbreaks were a possibility and that they would have to be dealt with immediately, obviously, like has happened in Victoria. The current spike in Victoria could have happened anywhere, may yet happen again because the virus is still present in the community and will be until we get a vaccine. So that's important to know. It's interesting the AMA have that view this morning. So internationally, we've got about another 70,000 people in Spain who are going back into more strict controls because there's been regional flare-ups of infections, and of course the United States infection numbers are soaring. Some interesting research has come out in the past couple of days. This is research that's been conducted by the Australian Institute of Family Studies. And what they've discovered is that the division of domestic labour amongst Australian families has barely budged during the pandemic, despite more than half of households shaking up their work arrangements. So they released their research findings last Thursday, which was the 2nd of July, the first results of its Life During COVID survey, which quizzed more than 7,000 Australians during May and June to understand how our nation was adjusting to the crisis. Almost 2/3 of respondents said they were now always working from home, compared to just 7% pre-pandemic. So that's a huge shift. But there's actually been very minimal change to the way parents share childcare and housework. 41% of female partners take care of most of the domestic chores, compared to 43% before, so that was only a 2% reduction. And similarly, 52% of mothers say they do the bulk of the parenting, a small drop from 54% pre-pandemic. The director of the Australian Institute for Family Studies said that obviously the results prove that social norms were quite pandemic resistant, and that she'd initially been expecting that the crisis, much like it had overhauled our working lives, might have helped transform some entrenched gender patterns where household responsibilities were concerned, but that has not happened yet. Only very small changes there. We also saw quite concerningly, late last week, the Australian Taxation Office had told 8,000 businesses that they may have to repay JobKeeper because they failed to provide enough paperwork. That's led to some small businesses claiming that they've been unfairly targeted. On Monday last week, sole traders received an email saying that they were not saying they were not entitled to the $1,500 a week fortnightly wage subsidy because they hadn't submitted either a tax return or proof of sales or supplies incurred before 2020. Obviously, newer businesses with low revenue have been pursued by the tax office despite suffering the required drop in revenue and operating before the date required to receive payments. This is a bit of a concern, so we want to make sure that if you've got any questions whatsoever about JobKeeper, if you're concerned about your ongoing eligibility with the ATO, get in touch with us. Let's have a chat about that because we want to make sure to keep you ahead of any concerns. The other thing I want to talk with you about this morning, which I think is timely given we're having a brief discussion about JobKeeper, is JobKeeper and annual leave, particularly this week and next week where we've got a lot of people taking annual leave because of school holidays. And many businesses have sought to reduce their annual leave liability by requiring employees who are on JobKeeper to take time off during COVID-19 and potentially also over this next couple of weeks. Changes obviously have been made to the Fair Work Act to cover this contingency, but it's really become a source of some contention between employers and employees, and there are some grey areas. So I thought it would be really useful to just remind everybody about some of the elements of that, given that we've just started a school holiday period. So both employees and employers tend to be familiar with the rules for taking and granting annual leave normally, under normal conditions. Both parties generally agree on when it should be taken. That tends to be the general rule. There are limited circumstances where employees can be told to have holiday. So for example, if they've accumulated more than 8 weeks of leave, or if the business is shutting down for a period, as many do each year between Christmas and New Year, for example, and at other times, they can be asked to take annual leave, but they have to have already had 8 weeks leave accumulated before they can be asked. Under, however, the Fair Work Act JobKeeper provisions, the rules are a little different, and we've obviously canvassed these a number of times over our daily Facebook live streams that we were doing before the change to weekly last week. So under the Fair Work Act JobKeeper provisions, the rules are a little different. Business owners can request their staff to take paid leave while they receive the JobKeeper payment. And employees in those circumstances cannot unreasonably refuse a request, but they must be paid at their usual rate for the days or weeks that they're on annual leave. So even if you've reduced the hours and days of your staff to a level where they're only receiving the $1,500 a fortnight before tax, JobKeeper, if your staff take annual leave, they actually need to be paid their normal wages for that period. Also, eligible staff can, so that's those staff that are receiving JobKeeper, can also take annual leave at half pay for twice the length of time, provided it's agreed in writing between the employer and the employee. Now let's have a bit of a look for a moment at the ability to refuse. So the legislation states that an employee may not reasonably refuse a request to take leave, but they must be allowed to keep a leave balance of at least 2 weeks. The definition of reasonable is consistently a bone of contention when it comes to its interpretation in employment law, but it's particularly been so a matter of contention in a number of recent disputes which have come before the Fair Work Commission. So in May, there was a Village Roadshow theme park employee who sought to refuse a request to take annual leave and instead to retain the bulk of her 9.3 weeks annual leave balance on the grounds that it was needed to cover several upcoming holidays for which she had not obtained formal approval. The Commission disagreed in that instance and sided with the employer. In another case, a part-time employee of the retail chain H&M met a similar fate, with the Fair Work Commission finding she was acting unreasonably when she refused to agree to take annual leave and contended it was not her responsibility to support the company's financial position by helping reduce its contingent liabilities, and also on the basis that her salary was less than the JobKeeper payments. So the Commission have come down in both those cases on the side of the employer in terms of that definition of reasonable. So if you've got any concerns about asking your staff to take annual leave and if they might refuse, get in touch with us and we can help you with that. Look, really what we want to be able to do and support with businesses is achieving an outcome that works for both the employer and the employee as far as possible. And if there's goodwill in that relationship, it should be possible to negotiate an outcome that both parties can live with without the need for the intervention of the Fair Work Commission or an external party. This can be easier for small business owners who know their employees personally, perhaps, than it is for large organisations which attempt to implement blanket leave policies. Ideally, look, you want to strike a balance between treating everyone on the team the same and having compassion and regard for individual circumstances, obviously. Look, being transparent with your employees, which we've talked about a number of times before, about your business's financial position can put a request to take annual leave in context, which might make it more helpful for the employee to understand. While you might not want to do a deep dive into the nitty-gritty, and I completely understand that, sharing some specifics about the challenges and liabilities you face might help them understand why the request is necessary. And look, support is more likely to be forthcoming if it's clear sacrifices are being made by everyone from the owner down in the business. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you care. That's incredibly important, and are doing all you reasonably can within the scope of keeping the business afloat and ensuring that staff will have a job when this is over. So asking staff to use up their annual leave during the pandemic can be fraught. Managing the process thoughtfully and respectfully, of course, is also has the positive benefits of keeping your team engaged, on-site and motivated to return after the crisis has passed. But if you've got any questions about JobKeeper and annual leave, JobKeeper and anything in terms of JobKeeper enabling directions, any of those sorts of things, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We'd be delighted to advise you and help you as it relates to your particular business. So lots to update you on, as there is going to be when we create a week in between the updates, as we have done now every Monday morning. But of course, if there's anything particularly significant between now and next Monday, we will get up and do a special live stream. So watch out for that. We will announce that and make sure all our watchers and listeners are aware. Obviously, this is being recorded and will be available on Facebook, YouTube, our website with a fact sheet, and LinkedIn afterwards as well. So you can always go back and do a refresh or watch if you haven't had a chance to it when it's happened live. So I haven't seen any questions in the chat screen yet, so please ask them if you have them. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us today. If you've got any specific questions about your business or you want us to help you out, you can contact us anytime in the contact details that we've given you in the chat screen this morning. You can also sign up to our newsletter, which has lots of really interesting and helpful tips and tricks and advice for you in there. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday evening for the second of our webinar series. So we started our webinar series last Thursday evening at 5:30 with the wonderful Rachel Fenn from Early Bird Bookkeeping, and we talked about payroll pitfalls. So that's available in our archive for you to go back and have a look at and read about. We also had a fact sheet. We also have a fact sheet for that as well. If you missed that, you can still reach that. We are, as I said, moving to weekly live updates on a Monday morning, and also a webinar series on a Wednesday late afternoon, evening at 5:30. Thursday late afternoon, early evening. And this particular Thursday, we will have our wonderful consultant psychologist who'll be still with you every month. So she'll be doing her monthly webinar this Thursday, exploring the psychology of a good workplace. She's going to cover some fantastic ground, so don't miss that. Invite your colleagues, your family, your friends. You don't want to miss this one, trust me. So we will be doing a deep dive into a particular HR or related topic in our webinar series each Thursday. So you'll get Jess this Thursday. Don't miss that. You can still catch up with our first one last Thursday with Rachel online, and we will be doing interviews and covering really relevant topics every Thursday evening in our webinar. So in the meantime, please hug the people that you're allowed to, wave cheerily at those that you yet can't. Stay safe, stay socially distant, keep washing those hands, and we'll really look forward to seeing you on Thursday with our webinar with Jessica. Thank you so much.